Charles here. Let's look at how we would draw some recessionary graphs. This is probably the most tested one graph out of all of the ones we need to know. You can see year after year after year, they love to test the economy being in what we call a recession. So we're just going to draw it real quick down here, make sure we understand the basics of it. We've got our long run aggregate supply. We've got our upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve, and then we have our aggregate demand curve. This is us in equilibrium, price level, real GDP on the horizontal, which is output, by the way. We're going to do YF right under that long run aggregate supply curve. That shows full employment incomes, Y standing for incomes. At full employment, here's our price level. Let's call it PL1. Good. This is us in equilibrium. And then for one reason or another, aggregate demand has shifted to the left. And this is us in a recession right there. That is our economy in a recessionary gap. We tend to be able to see that price levels have gone down and output has gone down. So price level goes down, output goes down. Unemployment, always going the opposite direction of output, had to go up. And this makes sense. In a recession, lots of people are out of work, prices are falling because nobody's buying anything, and output is falling also. So that is our recession. Let's just practice it, walk through. There's a lot of these, and we're going to do almost all of them. Let's see how quickly. And we'll add in a little extra stuff just to make it fun. The economy of Sweden is in long-run equilibrium, so far, this one is just a straight up and down long-run equilibrium graph, so that's not really a recession. It's just what we did. We're going to do it again. Aggregate demand, price level, real GDP on the horizontal axis, which is output, but I'm going to stop drawing that pretty quick. Just real GDP like the College Board does. YF, they're telling us that the current account is in a surplus. I know when the current account is in a surplus, and this is a little further on until we get to foreign exchange. When the current account is in a surplus, I know my financial account has to be in what we call a deficit. And I know that because these two always have to equal 0. So if this was a +2, this one's going to have to be a -2. I could move that down a little bit, couldn't I? That's in a -2. So we know that our financial account would have to be in a deficit, and we would explain it with that formula right there. Good to go. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the short run aggregate supply, long run aggregate supply, and aggregate demand curves for Sweden. Show the current equilibrium Y1, PL1. So instead of YF, I would have done Y1 there. PL1 is right here. All right, we're in long run equilibrium, and then something changes. Assume the United Kingdom decreases its imports from Sweden. So that's a little strangely worded, right? But it just implies the UK is buying less of Swedish stuff. So that implies that Sweden's exports, which they were exporting to the UK, are going down. If the UK's imports are decreasing, that means Sweden's exports are decreasing. The UK is not buying Swedish goods. That exports go down. You and I know aggregate demand goes down. And we can see what happens to the price level and output. We've fallen into a recessionary gap. PL2, Y2, easy enough. All right, PL2, Y2, I think we got all that done. So this is our graph. I would show some arrows showing that shift of aggregate demand. I like the arrows on the inside of the curves. The College Board does too, but you, teacher, might have different ideas. D, as a result of the decrease in the UK's imports from Sweden, would policymakers in Sweden be more concerned about cyclical unemployment or inflationary pressures? Well, we've already said that the price level's going down, so they're not worrying about inflation. They would be worried about cyclical unemployment, which is unemployment during a recession. They're just checking to see if you know it. So let's do our little, what we call our causal chain of thinking here. We know exports in Sweden went down. That should have made sense that our aggregate demand went down. Remember, aggregate demand is C plus I plus G plus XN. That X minus N is net exports. So what do we know is if exports go down, net exports go down. There you go. I should probably write net exports. Aggregate demand therefore has to fall. That means the price level is going to go down. Real GDP goes down. Output goes down. Same thing as real GDP. Therefore, unemployment always goes in the opposite direction of output. It's got to go up. This is sort of our causal chain of thinking here. This is most of our multiple choice questions. If you know what's going on, they might say net exports went down. What happened to the price level? What happened to unemployment? If you know this, you can answer most of your multiple choice fairly quickly. So let's keep in practice 2019. They're just telling us they're in a recessionary gap, and then they just want us to draw it. Again, we can do that very quickly. Doesn't take any time, especially if we've done it a lot. You know what they're looking for because they asked it every year, or lots of years. P01, yeah, Y1, Y1. They did tell us we were in a recessionary gap, and look what I'm drawing. I kind of got lost in it there for a second. Here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that over there. And I could have shown that. You could have drawn that aggregate demand there at full employment and then shown it shifting to the left, but we don't really need to do that. And it does make the graph a little, oops, that's not working, is it? It does make the graph a little squirrely. We've got too much stuff on there. So let's just draw our aggregate demand to the left of full employment and recognize that that's good enough. This could be PL1, here's Y1, and here's YF, income for full employments. We can see output's gone down. We can see that the price level's gone down. So YF, Y1, PL1, easy. This is our graph right here. I didn't do that very well. Let's see if I can do the next one better. 2018, day one, our economy is in a recession, easy enough. Long run aggregate, short run aggregate demand, what a surprise, PL1, Y1. So we're just going to show ourselves in that recession again, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw it like you and I should draw it, with aggregate demand to the left of what we would think of as full employment here. PL, price level on the vertical, our GDP on the horizontal, and it is a PLY1, PL1, Y1. This should be always YF under your long run aggregate supply. It shows full employment. All right, we're good. Now assume that the Eurozone, a major trading partner for the U.S., enters into a recession. What will be the effect on U.S. exports in the Eurozone? Well, again, kind of the same scenario as before. If the Eurozone goes into their own recession, what we understand is their incomes are going to go down. If their incomes go down, they buy less of our exports. If the U.S. exports go down, well, we've kind of already done it again. If exports in the U.S. go down, we know aggregate demand goes down, we know the price level goes down, we know real GDP goes down, we know output goes down, and we know unemployment has to go up. These two are always in the opposite direction. So we were in a recession, we drew it, and then the Eurozone went into their own recession. So guess what happened to the U.S.'s recession? It got even worse, right? So this would be PL2 probably, maybe Y2, something like that. We explained it. Now again, you wouldn't use arrows down here to explain it, right? Exports went down, aggregate demand. You could probably jump to output and then unemployment. I'd want to use all that though to actually explain what's going on there. Real output is the same as what we've talked about here. Y2, real output is real GDP, right? So we just have to know that. We showed the effect of the change with an arrow. We also showed, when they say show, they're talking about not only showing it with arrows, right, but also with numbers, right? We went from Y1 to Y2. That showed what the change was, and then also these arrows showing that shift of aggregate demand. Easy enough. What will be the effect of the change on unemployment? We've already shown what happens to unemployment. Yeah. So I don't think What will be the effect of the change identified in unemployment? Yeah, we would just say unemployment went up. That's easy enough. I was looking for something a little tighter there, but that's fine. All right, 2017. Let's see if we can do it. Tick, tick. This one's a little bit different, but I like it because I think this is important. Lots of times, as we've seen before, they just tell you you're in a recession, and we know how to do it. Here, they're being a little bit trickier. They're telling you your natural rate of unemployment. Now, what you should know is that your natural rate of unemployment, when I do YF down here, that is showing, or I guess I like to say it better, that is full employment right there. That's output at full employment. This right here is equilibrium. We know it's long run equilibrium, right? We also could call it full employment. We know the graph, right? We're at full employment. We could also call it potential real GDP. We could call it potential output because we know those two are the same things. We also need to know that that's our natural rate of unemployment. When you are fully employed, you are at your natural rate. So this is output at our natural rate or our natural rate of unemployment. And they're telling us it is 5%. I don't really like drawing this on here. It should just make sense to you in just a second. Let's put our real GDP. But then they're telling us our actual unemployment rate is 7%, while our natural rate of unemployment is 5%. Don't worry about the inflation rate. The understanding here is that we have more unemployment. It's greater than our natural rate because it's 7%. So if I had to write that out, actual unemployment is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. This implies a recession. We should know it is a recession, and I know that language is strange, but we actually have more unemployment than at our natural rate. The only thing that makes sense with is a recessionary gap. So PL1 again, Y1, maybe somewhere here. We're not worried about this just yet. We'll do Phillips curve someplace else. Neither are we worried about a classical view, no policy actions. Well, here we are in a recession. We knew we were in a recession because that's the numbers they gave us. And then they say identify a fiscal policy action. Now, fiscal policy actions are two things, either government spending or taxes that would reduce unemployment. These are our fiscal policies. There's only two things government can do. They can government spend or they can increase or decrease taxes. So we need an expansionary fiscal policy. We need to get out of a recession. So we need government to go up, government spending to go up, or taxes to go down. Easy enough to get us back to full employment. To reduce unemployment, either one of those could have been chosen. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the aggregate short run and show the impact on the economic price level and real GDP of the fiscal policy action identified in Part C. So recognize that originally up here for A, they wanted you to draw a Phillips curve. So we would not have had this, but now we just did. We would just show our arrows going back. We could show our price level going up. We could show output going back up. Easy enough. When we know our formula again for aggregate demand is C plus I plus G plus XN. So if government spending goes up, we know aggregate demand has to go up. So all they're really wanting to see is that rightward shift. And notice they didn't ask for a long run aggregate supply curve because that implies that we're making it back to full employment if you have a long run aggregate supply. It's a bit of a tricky one. I like it, but I would not have wanted to draw that long run aggregate supply curve here. If they don't tell you to draw it, there's a reason. It's probably because it's a little unhelpful, or it's more helpful to just do exactly what they say. We know that aggregate demand had to increase. We don't know that we went back to full employment. We just know that aggregate demand increased, and that's why they didn't really want that long run. Anyway. 2016, let's see if we get, this one's pretty simple. Again, they tell us actual unemployment rate is above the natural rate. So as soon as we saw that our actual rate of unemployment was greater or above the natural rate of unemployment, they could have said your actual rate of unemployment is greater than full employment, right? These two are the same thing. We know we're talking about a recession. So if we had to draw it, again, they wanted us to do a Phillips curve for this one. But again, I think the language is what's important here. That you recognize that they're using strange language to get you to understand that this economy is in a recession. The quicker you learn their language, obviously the less troubles we have on our AP exams. All right, 2015. Now, look at what they say here. The economy is operating below full employment. They could say output is less than full employment. It's kind of what they're saying. Now, that should make sense to you, I hope, as a recession, since all we're doing right now are recessions. That's kind of easy to make sense of. Aggregate demand is to the left, price level, real GDP. The output level, our short-run equilibrium output level, is right here. Let's call it PL1, Y1. This is obviously YF. This is us at full employment, but our output level is much less than we would be at full employment. We could see that that used to be where our price level was, and then for some reason or another, aggregate demand slid to the left, giving us what we call our recessionary gap. Easy enough. Y1, PL1, YF. What a surprise. Let's keep going here. Nicely done. 2014. Assume that the U.S. economy is currently operating below full employment level. I'm not going to do it again. We know what that means, right? Operating below full employment means recession. They want us to draw the graph, and then they're going to give us something. I don't mind drawing the graphs. I love drawing graphs. It makes me happy. Almost like going zen or something. All right, aggregate demand, price level, real GDP, and I know that's PL1, Y1. What a surprise. Y1, PL1, YF. Y1, PL1, YF. Output's gone down. Price level's gone down. This is definitely our recessionary gap. We're all golden. Then they say the United States government increases spending on goods and services, which is financed by borrowing. How will the increase in government spending? You and I know aggregate demand is C plus I plus G plus XN. Minus N is a better way to say it, but we know that's net exports. And we know that anytime government spending goes up, it's got to kick aggregate demand back toward full employment. We know it's going to shift it. We don't know that we go all the way back, but we know it's going to shift it to the right if there's more government spending. Now, cyclical unemployment is only during a recession. You should have remembered that from when you were doing unemployment questions. So if we're moving away from recession toward full employment, cyclical unemployment has to be going down. Now, this is something to put into your wheelhousing for the rest of your course here. Your natural rate of unemployment, again, is right there. That is our output at full employment. This is our natural rate of unemployment. We could have probably just said it's right there, but we recognize that we can see it down here. No matter what happens with fiscal or monetary policy, if aggregate demand shifting left, shifting right, that full employment point doesn't change. So almost all of these questions are natural rate of unemployment. There's no change to it. Because it doesn't matter if they had shifted aggregate demand way over here or there. Notice that that full employment spot right up under long-run aggregate supply curve doesn't change. To get that to change, you'd have to have your long-run aggregate supply curve shift. And there are dozens of questions that kind of do that. But not here. We're not going to talk about it. Nicely done. 2011, they just tell us we're in a recession. We're not going to do a Phillips curve here. They just want us just to draw a regular aggregate demand and aggregate supply in a recession. Now, notice that they didn't ask me to draw a long-run aggregate supply curve. That's kind of interesting, right? So I've got a short-run aggregate supply and I've got aggregate demand. For me to show a recession, maybe I could just assume that's a recession. I don't know. Let's do it here. Oh, they wanted long-run equilibrium output as YF. So this is what we know. Look, I'm just going to draw that in and do YF right there. I'm going to call that my long-run aggregate supply curve. This is PL1. I know this is Y1. I know I'm in a recession. Done. They wanted it YE, PLE. Okay. PLE. Done. To balance the budget, suppose the government decides to raise income taxes. Now, we're in a recession. Do you think they want to raise income taxes during a recession when people are losing their jobs? Probably not. But if they did increase taxes, I'm going to move this up just a little bit. If they raise taxes, what happens to people's disposable income? This is kind of how I think about the tax thing here. If they have to pay more money to the government, their disposable income is going to go down. Well, that's going to affect the amount of money they have, so their consumption goes down, aggregate demand goes down, price level goes down, real GDP goes down. This is all what we understand. Output goes down, and unemployment obviously goes up. Remember, these two go in the opposite direction. So on your graph drawn in part B, see, that's why they didn't want me to draw that long run aggregate supply curve. I hate the way they did that. To balance, shows the government decides to raise which maintain the current level of spending on the graph part B, show the effect of the increase in taxes on the new equilibrium output Y2. So I know it's going to, oops, I was about to do something wrong there, which happens. What I know is an increase in taxes drives aggregate demand curve down, and we would be moving further away from PL2, Y2, further away from full employment. So we're worse off than we were before. Easy enough. A recession, then the government increases taxes, fiscal, this is called contractionary fiscal policy. The government can only do two things, government spending and taxes. They raise taxes, they're reducing the economy, making it go down. Easy enough. 2010, Form B, country is in a short-run equilibrium with an output level less than full employment output. And then they tell us this information that we have an upward sloping aggregate supply curve, which we usually do anyway. They're just throwing that in there just to try to fool you. Use a correctly labeled aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And I hate it when there was a number of years where they wanted our full employment point. So I'm just going to give that right there. I don't really like the way they do this, but aggregate demand is to the right because I know we are in a recession. I'm going to do that as PL1, Y1 like we already know. Jeez, okay, E, it is. They don't ask me for a long run aggregate supply curve. I probably would want to give it anyway. I don't think they take any points from your recognizing that that's where YF is. B, assume the country's government increases government spending. Show out an increase. See, so that's what they're saying. They're not saying we're going back to full employment. So we don't really know. We know where full employment is. I could probably get rid of this. Oops. I could probably get rid of that. And all I'd have to do is show aggregate demand shifting someplace toward the right. And I think I'd be okay with my Y2 and my PL2, right? The understanding is that price level's gone up as government does some more spending. Military would be government spending. Aggregate demand shifts to the right toward full employment. We don't know whether we're getting back to full employment or not. We showed what happened to our aggregate demand, and we showed our new price level, Y2, PL2. Easy enough. All right. Let's do another one. Unemployment is greater than the natural rate. Again, if your actual unemployment is greater than your natural rate of unemployment, you are in a recession. So, using a correct graph of the aggregate demand, aggregate supply, show it. There's a few years here where they didn't want you, they didn't use that long run aggregate supply, which I think they've gotten over that. It's almost always asked for nowadays. Real GDP, PLC, YC, that's just weird. Let's call it PLC, YC, unemployment. We know we're in a recession. The president of Southland is receiving. Look at that, though. We don't really, without a long run, can you really tell that we're in a recession? You can't, right? We just look like we're at equilibrium, right? And we are. We're at our short run equilibrium without some kind of understanding of where we are with that long run. it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm just going to draw this in because it makes me happy. Now I know clearly that I'm in a recession because it's to the left of your long-run aggregate supply curve. And the president is receiving advice from Cogeles and Raymond about how to reduce unemployment. Cogeles advises the president to decrease personal income taxes. Well, taxes go down. I know that makes consumption. People have more money to spend because they're not giving it to the government. Consumption goes up, aggregate demand goes up, price level goes up, real GDP goes up, output goes up, and I know unemployment would go down. All that's happening there is oops, that's not what I want. Come on, Charles, get it together. With taxes going down is expansionary fiscal policy. And that would shift aggregate demand back toward the right there. I don't know, again, whether I'm going back to full employment. Probably that's why they didn't give me a talk about a long-run aggregate supply. They just wanted to see you shifting that aggregate demand to the right. They wanted you to know that anytime taxes go down, it's expansionary. So we know that, and they don't even ask for it. But let's do Y2, PL2, price level went up. Output went up. We're coming out of our recessionary gap. And we showed how to explain it would be right there, right? To get to aggregate demand, you'd have to use the determinant of taxes going down. You could probably stop right after that. How would a decrease in taxes affect aggregate demand? Well, taxes go down. I would say consumption goes up. You got to use that determinant of aggregate demand to say that therefore aggregate demand went up. Taxes go down, consumption goes up, aggregate demand goes up. I think you can stop there. I like all of that. I think that would be, and obviously you wouldn't use arrows, you'd explain it. All right, 2007, Form B, 1, assumed that Australia, New Zealand. Australia's in a recession. So they want us to do aggregate demand and aggregate supply for New Zealand. Most of the time, this is just a little hard to read and understand what's going on. Notice they don't ask for a long-run aggregate supply curve again, but that's okay. This is New Zealand. And they're saying that Australia is coming out of its recession. So if it's coming out of its recession, Australia is the way I think about this, is Australia's incomes are increasing. And if they're increasing, they're going to buy more New Zealand stuff. I know C plus I plus G plus XN. I know if exports go up, net exports has to go up, which means aggregate demand is going to shift to the right. Let's do that PL1, Y1. Let's do that PL2, Y2. Let's show some arrows and recognize that aggregate demand in New Zealand is increasing. I would want to explain that as Australian incomes go up, they're going to buy more New Zealand stuff, which means New Zealand's exports increase. If exports go up, I know aggregate demand for New Zealand would go up also, and I can stop there. If I want to get to output, they don't ask us to explain output. You could just say output goes up here and be done with it. But you and I know when aggregate demand goes up, we should say at the same time, price level goes up, real GDP goes up, output goes up, and unemployment goes down. The quicker you can know all of that in your brain, the much better off you are for being able to do these really fast on the AP exam. So number one here for 2006, it's getting tiring. Operating at equilibrium below full employment. We already know that that is code for a recession. So we shouldn't even have to, once we saw it, we know we're operating below full employment. They do want a long-run aggregate supply, and they do want us to be at our current equilibrium output in a recession. So I would draw it. Again, you and I don't need to talk about it. We've done this enough so far. We are in a recession. Price level, real GDP, PL1, Y1, YF. They didn't ask for it, but I might as well know. I know where it all is. So I do it the same way like a child every time. Current equilibrium output and price level, we're done. B, now assume there's an increase in the price of oil. I put this one on here specifically because there are a number of graphs we have to know just off the top of our heads. One of them is recession. Obviously, there is recessionary gaps. We have to know long-run equilibrium, or those equilibrium graphs where everything lines up. We have to know an inflationary gap. We need to know stagflation, which is what we're doing in just a second. And we need to know what we call growth, or what we call a positive supply shock, right? Positive supply shock would be a rightward shift of your short-run aggregate supply, shifting to the right. Most of the time, we're going to talk about that for a classical view. But here, they gave us something a little strange. They had us start in a recession. They told me the world price of oil goes up. Now, the way I think of this is your short-run aggregate supply has to do with business costs. And if this is too much for you right now, just skip it and go on. But if business costs go up, because oil is a cost of business, as the price of oil goes up, an input for businesses, that implies your short-run aggregate supply curve would shift to the left. This is what we call stagflation. Stagflation is that leftward shift of a short run. This was ours in a recession. Now, sometimes teachers don't teach this. They call both of these a recessionary gap. They're not. With a recession, and I'm going to draw a little arrow, price level went down, output went down, unemployment went up. That is a recessionary gap. With stagflation, notice that the price level went up, but output went down, and of course, unemployment went up. But they're two different things. They're two different graphs, and you have to know they're caused by two different things, or a different thing. Stagflation is anytime your short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to the right. A recession is anytime aggregate demand shifts to the left. Sorry, I said that all screwed up, didn't I? Anytime your short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to the left, that is stagflation. Anytime aggregate demand shifts to the left, that's a recession. They are two different things, mainly recognized by what's going on with the price level. Output and unemployment we're still worse off. But for one, we're doubly worse off because there's also higher prices when you lost your job. At least in a recession, prices are going down when you lose your job. I don't know if that's necessary. So we need to know all five of these. Be able to draw all five of these just off the top of your head, because it's going to be the first questions are always usually one of these five. Mostly recession, that would be the top one. Then probably long run and equilibrium and inflation are about equal, 5 or 6. The stagflation is 3 or 4, I think. And I don't think I've ever seen a growth or a positive supply shock to start off a FRQ. Anyway, we showed our short run aggregate supply curve shifting to the left. We showed what happened to price level. Price level went up to PL2 and output fell even further to Y2. Easy. And we know what happens to unemployment. With a stagflation, unemployment has to go up. And they do want us to explain. So here I would say oil prices have to do with business cost. As oil prices go up, that's a business cost. Oil is an input to business. So your short run aggregate supply curve shifts to the left, driving up the price level, driving output down, and making unemployment go up. Remember, output and unemployment always go together. So I think we're golden there. As soon as we saw unemployment, you know you got to talk about output. And however you got to get there, that's fine. That'll make sense. But always use the word output there. All right, again, one, our economy is operating at less than full employment. They want your long run. They want a current. You getting tired of this yet? It is about doing it a lot. And if you do it a lot, you can do it very fast. And if you've seen these quite a bit, there's nothing new there. You know where to look, you know how to read it, and you just get good at knowing where everything is. So I think we did everything. We knew that was a code for recession. We drew our aggregate demand and aggregate supply with our long run, and then we showed the price level and output. Nicely done. All right, and that is our recessionary gap. Almost done here. Assume the economy is operating at less than full employment. We know that's a recession. I'm not drawing it again. You know where full employment output is? Yes, I will. I'll draw it again for you. Every so often, that's just so we do, and we make sure we understand all the language. We're in a recession. Full employment output. Remember, it's real GDP on the horizontal, but we could have called it output. We're going to call that YF because that is full employment output. This is current output. output. We'll call it Y1, and that's our current price level, PL1. Current price level, current output, and then output and full employment. We're golden. 2003, assume the economy is, they get a little bit more fun. We start having stuff that we can do here. The economy is operating below full employment. Don't worry so much about the balance of trade or the deficit. Draw aggregate demand and aggregate supply, show their current output and price level. Short run aggregate supply, downward sloping aggregate demand, price level, real GDP. We are in a recession. Can I look at that and know it's a recession? No, I can't because they didn't ask me for a long run equilibrium. Long run aggregate supply curve. Suppose the government increases spending to achieve full employment output. So government spending is going up. Show the short run effects that the increased deficit spending would have on each of the following. Well, we know aggregate demand is going to go up because government spending goes up. We know that's going to increase output and the price level, right? We know if government spending increases, this is what we call expansionary fiscal policy. Government spending goes up. I know it kicks up aggregate demand. I should have probably added consumption in there. I like government spending increases consumption. Let's make aggregate demand go up. Price level goes up. Real GDP goes up. Output goes up. And if they had asked us about unemployment, we knew it went down. Easy enough. We just need to show that aggregate demand shifting, show that new price level and income or output. We'll call it PL2. We'll call it Y2. We'll show some arrows, and we are done. Nicely done. I like it. All right. 2003. They just tell us we're in a recession. Full employment output, current output level, current price level. There's a decrease in spending during a recession. Think about that for a second. If we are in a recession, and I'm just going to draw it like we know how to draw it, and full employment would be YF, again, Y1, price level 1. Hopefully you're getting tired of these. Current output, current price level. Federal government announces a major decrease. Government spending goes down. I know when government spending goes down, there's less money in the economy. Consumption goes down. Or maybe I should say there's less spending by the government. So that implies less people are getting paid by the government, which means consumption goes down. Aggregate demand goes down. This is a contractionary. Contraction meaning make something smaller. Fiscal policy, right? So as it's contractionary, it drives down price levels, drives down real GDP, drives down output, and it would increase unemployment. Again, we're in a recession and somebody decided to decrease spending. Probably not the best time to do it. We know price level went down, we know output went down, Y2, PL1, level of output, price level. Now, explain the mechanism on which a decrease in government spending will affect the unemployment rate. That's what we're doing right here, right? And I would have given them all this. I would have just said when the government spending goes down, less money for people to spend, so consumption is going to decrease, aggregate demand decreases. If you're talking about aggregate demand decreases, then you could jump to real GDP and output, and of course, we're trying to get to explain unemployment. To explain unemployment, you need output or real GDP. Both of these will do. They always use output, though. So that's where I'm starting. This is definitely sort of an effect of government spending, so I would have added that in there and that, and then we could have jumped to output and unemployment. They're not really asking us about price level, and these two are the same thing. So cool. All right. Oh my goodness, almost done. Assume the economy is operating below full employment level. We know that means recession. A little bit different stuff here. I like some of the older questions because they're making you be a little, seems like it was maybe slightly simpler maybe a while ago. Here we are below full employment or with our recession. We'll call it PL1 again. We'll call it Y1. We call that YF. That's full employment. Real output, that's real GDP. How an increase in government spending, anytime government spending, and that's why they didn't want us to draw that long run aggregate supply curve. I still like to draw it. I don't think they take any points away from you. You're showing them something extra. I know aggregate demand's increasing. I'm answering the question, what they need. Increase in government spending is going to kick up real output, and it's going to kick up the price level because it's expansionary. How would it affect the real interest rates? We're not going to go into that other than if you're here just catching up on stuff. Government spending and real interest rates go in the same direction. Anytime government spending goes up, real interest rates go up. You just need to know it. And think about that. If real interest rates are going up, well, what happens to investment when interest rates are higher? Now, all through this course, all the way until we get to foreign exchange, anytime I talk about interest rates, I'm talking about taking out a loan. We're talking about taking out, borrowing money from the bank. That's what investment is borrowing money from the bank to invest and build capital goods or whatever you're building. My question is always here, would you rather borrow money at 20% or 2%? Most people would rather pay back only 2% on the money they borrow. So if real interest rates are now 20%, I know less people are willing to borrow because those interest rates are really high, so investment is going to go down. That's what we're looking for there, is to understand that when government spending goes up, real interest rates go up. When real interest rates go up, investment goes down. I'm trying to think if there was anything that I needed to add in there. I would say real interest rates go up, therefore people are less likely to borrow money at those high interest rates. Therefore, there's going to be less what we call capital formation or investment. We could just stick with investment. We don't need to go any further than that. Now assume that instead of increasing government spending, the government decreases corporate profit taxes. Tricky. So businesses are paying less taxes. Well, if business taxes go down, we should recognize that what that changes is our short-run aggregate supply curve, right? Business taxes or business costs, let's call them, go down, your short-run aggregate supply curve is going to shift to the right. Now, they're not asking us to draw this, but we should recognize that price level is going to go down, output's going to go up, right? As businesses' costs go down, they tend to lower their prices, and that means people are going to buy more stuff. So output would increase, let's say from Y1 to Y2, and we'll go from PL1 to PL2. That's sort of our short run sort of understanding. We understand that corporate taxes, we do know there's going to be more investment. So I kind of might have a brain fart on that for just a second. I would assume that anytime there's businesses have more money to spend, they're going to invest in capital goods. So we're also going to get this increase in what we call investment. They're going to take some of that money. So I'm going to say aggregate demand goes up. Your long-run aggregate supply is affected by capital production. Output goes up, price level goes up. The way we know and answer this question, and if this is too far for where you are, just go ahead and run by it. Don't think about it. But we should know and sort of understand this. What we're saying is, I don't know how to answer that one. Wow. Instead of increasing government spending, they decrease corporate profit taxes. Now, that's tricky because they started us talking about real interest rates, and I got my brain all ready to talk about real interest rates and how that affects long-run aggregate supply. And then they flipped it on me here and did corporate taxes. So I'm assuming that what happens when corporate taxes go down, price level goes down. If price level's going down, that should be driving interest rates down. If interest rates go down, investment has to go up, which means there would be an increase in long-run aggregate supply. I could have done that, but I could have also just said, as there's more investment, I know our long-run aggregate supply curve has to increase, or what you and I would say, shift to the right. You should know that your long-run aggregate supply curve is the same thing as your PPC curve. I know this is going to be a long video, so I'm about to be done here. But your PPC and your long-run aggregate supply are the same curve. If there's more what we call capital formation because there's more investment, and if there is more investment, We know there is going to be more capital formation. Then we know our long run average supply shifts to the right and our PPC shifts out. This is more economic growth. Wow. That one was much more complicated than I probably should have jumped into on this page, but that's okay. That was how you guys see what's going on here. Our last one, thank goodness. Let's see if we can do it. We're in a recession, aggregate demand, aggregate supply, price level, real GDP. I'm just going to draw it on the side here. They don't ask for the long run aggregate supply curve. They used to not do it as much. They do it almost all the time now. But here we are in a recession. We know where we are, Y1, PL1, and I'm going to do YF because that makes me happy. There's a debate to decrease purchases by a given amount or increase purchases. Well, that one is an MPC, MPS question. So it's not going to make a lot of sense to you just right now, but government has the bigger multiplier. So if we increase government spending, that's going to give us the biggest kick. That'll be in a different video. Don't worry about it. I know aggregate demand is going to shift to the right when that happens. As we all know, when government spending goes up, aggregate demand goes up. Consumption, that's the thing I left off here that I always like to add. Consumption goes up. We know real GDP and the price level go up. If price levels, I'm not going to talk about imports and exports. That's going to get really strange here. And if there's, again, this is what we talked about before. If there's more investment, that's going to kick up aggregate demand because we know aggregate demand C plus I plus G plus XN, and investment is I. Whew, tiring. But as soon as I saw that there was more investment, as investment goes up, I know that means there's got to be more capital goods being produced. We can assume some of this investment has to be capital formation. We could have called it capital stock. We could have called it capital, physical capital or capital goods. Doesn't matter. We know there's more capital goods. Therefore, your long run aggregate supply curve is going to shift to the right. There's going to be more economic growth. Wow. That was a long video, and if you stuck through all of that, you don't like yourself. Keep working hard. Let me know how I can help. If you need any tutoring or you just want to send me an email and say, Charles, my teacher's sending me some strange stuff, and you want me to look at it, WCWAUGH, W-A-U-G-H, that's a G, by the way, WCWAUGH at AOL.com. Don't laugh at my AOL account. It's older than you are. All right. Be safe. Take care. Bye.